Angai everyone, and welcome to my presentation on Inuktut, which is the language of the Inuit people. So Angai actually means hello and goodbye in the language, but actually that word was only created once with the arrival of Europeans, because before that there was no formal hello and goodbye. It's actually led to Inuit people nicknaming Europeans Haluraluk, which translates into the big hellos. So the reason I picked this topic was because of my experience at the 2019 Canada Winter Games. Word for game is Piniguak. Sorry about the pronunciations. Not sure if they're correct. And then when I was there with in the photo here, my Pikati Piulak, which means best friend. And I was there as the team captain for Manitoba's badminton team. And then they give you these pins that you're meant to trade with other athletes from different provinces. And as you can guess, the ones that are the hottest commodities are the ones that are the most rare, which are the Nunavut teams. And luckily for me, 10 of Nunavut's 11 athletes were on the badminton team. So I actually got my hands on a set. So as you can see here, this is a kid playing the string game. It actually moves. It's 4 different pieces of a pin set. Pretty cool. And when I was trading, I forgot to mention that I traded for this toque and these mitts as well. I found that they would speak with each other in their own language, and of course I didn't recognize it. But I thought that they were speaking a lot of small, short words to each other, and boy was I wrong. So as you can see, this word is very long, and it basically translates into I can't hear very well. So the reason why this word is so long is that Inuktut is a language very different from English in the sense that it is a polysynthetic language. So in English, words are the basic unit of meaning. So if I say a sentence like I went to the store, each word has meaning and stands on its own. Whereas in Inuktut, roots and affixes are the basic unit of meaning. So if you see on the right side of the slide here, you have roots at the top. So those are just examples. So one would be alek, which means to depart. And then you can add different affixes on at the end. So one of them is like tutit, which means you. So then put together, it's alek tutit, which means you depart. Sorry if my pronunciation is wrong. But so basically what you can do is you can take a root and then add several different affixes onto the end, and in theory it'll make a word that in English would be several different words, right? So one of their words could be a whole sentence for us. This is a very hard concept to wrap your head around. But that's why these words can be so long, and then that also explains why a lot of them are more unique than English. There's also 2 alphabets that they use for Inuktut. One is the Roman alphabet, the same one we use in English, except there's only 3 vowels and 18 consonants, so about 5 letters less. This was developed by Christian missionaries in Greenland in the 1700s. They translated the New Testament. That was the first thing they did, and they passed it around in an attempt to convert Inuit people to Christianity. The second one you guys might be familiar with, which is the syllabic alphabet, which uses these symbols, and was developed actually about 150 years afterwards in Labrador. Yeah, so it's actually somewhat ironic that people who were trying to change the Inuits' cultural identity and religion were actually helped preserve their language in a way by writing it down. So Inuktut is actually not one language, but rather it is an umbrella term that describes Inuit languages all the way from Alaska to Greenland, including some of the biggest and most popular ones like Inuktitut, which you guys are probably the most familiar with, and then but it encompasses a lot of different dialects. So if you see on this map here, there's different dialects per region, because a lot of Inuit in the past were in some very small communities, kind of isolated from each other, with not a lot of context, so they'd all develop their own dialects, to the point where actually Alaskan Inuit people, for example, would not be able to understand Greenland Inuit people. So there's a lot of variation within the language, or within languages, but there's no difference in writing necessarily, but it's mostly difference in pronunciation. So another thing that is nowadays, a lot of these communities are congregated into bigger communities, like Iqaluit, for example. So a lot of these dialects have been lost, and then also there's a lot of merging of dialects, which has helped with radio. Here's an image of a woman who runs a Inuit radio station in Labrador. And then like slang words from Labrador can then be heard in Alaska, and they might pick them up, for example, things like that. So as we talked about in class, I believe it was Connor or Jill, but a lot of Inuit language or communication is actually non-verbal. So for example, there's no words for yes or no necessarily, but it's yes would be, and then no would be scrunching up your nose. And there's also other ones like cuckoo would be this, and there's a fun video you can watch. I'll put it in the description. This has actually led to a lot of Inuit people, kids in particular, being thought of as rude or stupid or slow, when it's actually not the case. It's simply that's their cultural way of communicating. It's just different from how ours is. And then I was reading about an elder who talked about how when he talks to people in the south, he'll say, how are you? And they'll just say, good, how about you? Right? Where he said, whereas an Inuit would probably take their time and actually think about how they're feeling and then give a thoughtful answer. So he said it's a big cultural difference there, and it's a bit interesting in that sense. Like all Indigenous peoples within Canada, Inuit people have been subject to colonialism, which involves an attempt to erase their traditional way of life, which includes language. So this was done largely through residential schools, where they were banned from speaking their own language, which has resulted in, over time, as you can see in this graph, this is just I believe, 10 or so year period, where the amount of people speaking Inuktut as a language has gone down, especially as people speaking as their main language. So the total has risen, but it's mostly people speaking a second language. But in places like Labrador, there's only about 25% of Inuit that can speak it. And this is largely the result of people not learning it in school, and then not being able to pass it down to their children. This has also resulted in like a sense of shame and lack of cultural identity for a lot of Indigenous people, not just Inuit. Not knowing their own language feels like you don't know your own culture, right? This is a big problem. However, there have been efforts to revitalize the language, like I showed before, the radio station. Also, the Prince of Wales flew several Inuit people out to Wales to show them how they preserved the Welsh language so that they could learn from it. So there are some positives moving forward. And then just to finish off with some interesting facts. So there's actually no swear words in Inuktut. Rather, how they express anger or frustration is through facial expression or tone. Another thing is that there's like a common myth that I'm sure a lot of people have heard, that the Inuit have 100 words for snow. Technically this is a myth, but it's the nature of the polysynthetic nature of the language, right, where you can add a bunch of affixes on, that the number is actually technically infinite. You can always make up new words for snow. And then finally, there's been studies that have shown that Indigenous people speaking their language has been correlated with less suicide rates. So the more people that speak their language, excuse me, the less suicide rates there are. So this is a very positive thing, and another reason to promote speaking languages such as Inuktut, especially for Inuit people. Alright, thank you for watching, and please check out these additional references. I'll put the links in the bio, and I hope you enjoy. Thanks.